Hello there, everybody. How you doing? Here we are. We're live. Hey, we're here. Hello. All right. So, hello, Sharon, and hello, Crockett, and Ziggy, and all the others I've seen in here. So, welcome and happy to be here. Now, today is going to be a little special because 4th of July. I'm going to go ahead and start off myself by having a shot of some blue agave tequila here. So, and as I'm doing so, I think what I'm going to do is we're going to listen to a little bit of Stacy. And in honor of my Facebook post today, I chose a particular song. So here it goes. Jamie's with us today, by the way, folks. Sam William Henry 582.
There's something going on. Freedom is in danger. Agents of the state, they're taking children from the manger. Oh, they will sacrifice your kid. Take Brendan Dassey, that's exactly what they did. They needed someone, oh, Jody wouldn't flip. They looked around, saw him quick. Oh, it made so much sense. Why? Oh, Brendan Dassey, he was Stephen's alibi. There's something going on in Wisconsin that's not kosher. We better stop. Let's all take a look closer.
Well, I slept. Everybody's rotated.
Will sacrifice your kid.
No, I was on there.
They visit him once, they visit him twice. They make him feel so safe. Sandwiches, soda, so nice. No cameras rolling and under no lights. Who knows what went on up in Fox Hill Monday night? There's something going on. Freedom is in danger. Everything about this can't get in stranger and stranger. All we know, they will sacrifice your kid. Oh, Brendan Dassey, that's exactly what they did. March 1st, alone in a room with Bert and Ernie. No parent present and no attorney. 4 hours later, with a touch of the knee, they finally get Brendan to agree. There's something going on. I said there's something going on. Oh, they will sacrifice your kid. Take Brendan Dassey, that's exactly what they did. There's something going on. I said freedom is in danger when the agents of the state can take the children from the manger. Oh, they will sacrifice your kid. Take Brendan Dassey, that's exactly what they did. Take Brendan Dassey, oh, that's exactly what they did.
And one more.
Wisconsin can be so cold. The scales of justice can erode.
No, I said I was starting the evening with a shot, not continuing to take shots.
If we accept lies, big and bold. Oh, we forget we live on Avery Road. We live on Avery Road. Could be you, could be me. We shouldn't sit by idly, accepting everything that we are told. I live on Avery Road. I live on Avery Road. Avery Road.
All right. Hello, everybody. How you doing? We're here today mainly because on a day to talk about freedom for, America, on a day that our nation declared its independence, as Travis was in here talking about earlier. It's the day that the Continental Congress approved essentially the Declaration of Independence written by Thomas Jefferson, which was essentially the day we declared war on the British in the colonies, and when we started to drive them out for whatever, or however you want to refer to it. But so it's led to the American Constitution, the Constitution which now sets up the basic principles for our freedoms and those sort of things. And so I figured it was good to talk about some of the people out there that are not being represented by that, or not. That somehow isn't helping them. Kids like Brendan Dassey and other, the other people, and in other cases, the many cases where the justice is very flimsy and flawed. And so we're going to talk about things like what reasonable doubt is, and probably going to get into talking a bit about free speech and that sort of stuff. So are you able to unmute there, Jamie, or?
Yep, I was just waiting. I was just listening.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So everybody say hi to Sam William Henry 582.
Hey, guys.
Here with us. We may get some other people to join us, by the way, folks. I have sent out some invites to some of your other favorite members of the Wrecking Crew, but, it's 4th of July, so people may be busy. They may be off at fireworks shows, so, we may not get everybody, but hopefully we'll see some of them at some point. But
maybe they're getting into a little bit of that Cuervo like you are.
I just have them one shot to start it off. I didn't plan on taking. I know how tequila is: 1 tequila, 2 tequila, 3 tequila floor, right?
Yeah, it eases the nerves though. like you need it as many times as you get to go live.
Yeah, I've kind of gotten used to it now, but yeah, no, it's good. It's it's loosened me up a little bit. I can tell. So, I was using my Sydney shot glass that I got while I was in Sydney.
Oh, nice.
With Mark and Paul and Stacy. So, and that was actually my first shot out of that bottle. That bottle's been sitting here for a long time. Because I'm not a drinker, folks, but occasionally, when it's called for and that sort of thing, I can enjoy it. So
you gotta let loose every now and then.
All right. And it's because I enjoy it that way that I actually enjoy it. Because if I was to try to do it every day, it would become a miserable habit.
Yep.
So it's like, I'm good with my relationship with alcohol because it's in balance. So I'm good with it. So
yeah, I'm actually I'm not cutting ties, but we're almost breaking up.
Right. Now, when I was in my early 20s, I was, yeah.
I actually never, I really never started, I don't think, until I was probably 25. Yeah. Just, I had young kids and didn't have the time. There goes the fireworks in my neighborhood.
Yeah, I anticipate we'll be hearing something here too pretty soon.
A little early for them, honestly. It's still light out.
I know. I can tell you're not even dark there. We're not even dark here yet, but I've been hearing a few of them. People love to blow stuff up, so
Hey, blow shit up and barbecue.
Right? And 4th of July is perfect for those people.
Yep.
So,
No, when you were mentioning some of the other cases, I've got to relook at it. But I now this case actually brought to light just me searching out other ones, and a perfect. There's a TV show now called I think it's called Kids in Prison or Kids in
Oh,
Life, and I can't remember
I think I
what.
saw something like that on Netflix.
Oh, no. This is actually on cable. It's called Wrongful Conviction Kids Edition or something like that.
Hmm.
And I've been watching a few of those and just learning about a few different cases. And the one I want to say his name was Keith. Was it Keith Cooper? Um, that one was one here recently, and he's been locked up for a while, but his case is going forward as well. Just like the one you were talking about the other day with Bianca, I saw that somebody had messaged you that case is actually going forward here pretty
Yeah,
good because they.
yeah.
Yeah,
What
go ahead.
somebody's saying is that it has turned out that that house where what was her name? Uh, Carrie, I don't know. The lady who was a cop at the time, who saw a toddler at that one house. Well, it's now come back or they've done some investigation. Apparently, that house comes back to one of the mother. Like it's coming back to one of her relatives. Apparently, I don't know. I haven't seen the proof of this yet, but this is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and supposedly the girlfriend was upset that her ex or his ex-wife was pissed off about his new living girlfriend, and that's kind of what spewed it or started off.
So this is all stemming from a lovers' quarrel, and
Yep.
so it would seem that if this were true, that then the mom Banica was trying to make it seem like Bianca disappeared so that
Yep.
the father and his girlfriend would no longer have access to her,
Yep.
but she would
Yep.
know where she is. So I mean it's an interesting theory. I got to see the proof, definitely, for sure.
Oh yeah.
But
The cool thing about this is, as we all know from starting with this case, if you really enjoy being in this kind of environment or this community, start looking into other cases. When this one's all said and done, there may be other people that need our help too. I'm sure they're already out there.
oh, definitely. I mean, there's lots of people besides Stephen and Brendan, for certain.
Yeah.
So
Not just us. I mean, this whole community. If you look across all of them, from Redditors and all our other people that are out there, I'm sure they'll find cases that interest them as well.
yeah,
That are new, and I hate to say the word exciting because somebody's in prison wrongfully because of it. I mean, but at least gets people going in that direction again with another case.
yeah. So this is a piece of artwork created last 4th of July by Susan Sexton. It's just brilliant. I think it symbolizes, the fact that here we are in America. We're all enjoying our freedom here on the 4th of July. But what about Brendan? Brendan showing up black and white against those noble colors. And I just love it. Very powerful piece that I thought Susan created. And it's brilliant. So now that it's 4th of July again, I thought I'd bring it out, dust it off, and show it off for everybody. So
Hopefully they'll miss another one.
yeah, hopefully we won't have to miss many more. So, but yeah, lovely piece by Susan Sexton. And so thank you, Susan, for that last year. She's working on some new pieces right now, actually. So looking forward to some of that. But
She does some cool stuff.
other piece that Susan created that was really, really awesome. This one here. So this is her other piece. As you can see, this is the camel that is the case of Brendan Dassey, right? You guys know, you can tell who that is. I mean, Susan's ability to get the facial, characteristics to where they come through. I mean, you guys can probably guess who these guys are down here, trying to help reinforce the camel with all this straw on its back, right? So I love it. This is a piece where I just kind of explained to her what I was looking for, kind of sat down and drew out a very elementary kind of rough outline sketch of what I was thinking. And then she took the ball and ran with it and came back with this. It was brilliant. So thank you for that, Susan. So
how, does she mail those off to you, or are they lithographs, or does she reproduce them?
no, she takes a picture of them. She takes a picture of her drawings with her phone.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah. Nothing that sophisticated.
You should almost get Travis in here if he'd be willing to come in and explain a little bit, how he was talking in there earlier, if he's available, about, the 4th of July, going into a little bit of the history.
There he is. Fireworks at the Dodger game tonight. I doubt he's at the Dodger game. I don't know why he's talking about it, but
well, is the Dodger game in? Are they playing in L.A. right now?
I don't know.
Or are they in Texas?
I think he's saying that for me. That because I'm a Dodger fan. So anyway, which another thing I like about Charlie Burns' shirt here, Dodger blue. Surprised he didn't make it Green Bay Packer gold and green, but
Yeah, my sister-in-law would love that.
Did you hear what Jamie said, Travis? And don't tell us to ask Tracy.
He was explaining it earlier when I was in the chat.
Travis is a Dodgers fan. Go blue. So are you in LA, Trav? Or are the Dodgers over there? Shoot him an invite. All right, we'll do. I'll send it to you in the Discord chat.
Can he get them in Discord?
In this chat, you can. And it looks like I already sent it there. Here, I'll send it again just to make sure. Yeah, it's already there. Check Discord, Trav.
We could get T1 on here to talk about his freedom of pleading the fifth for every single conversation we've got.
Yeah, right? Yeah, there you go. With his ball gag, it'll all be right. So
sound like the teacher from
it's Peanuts.
Hello.
What's up, Trav?
Travis, how you doing?
Hey. How you doing?
Good.
Good. We're good. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. Lovely 4th of July. Happy 4th of July to
You too.
everybody.
Been a nice day for me too. Yeah, been good. Pleasant.
I was a
Been
couple of my
call earlier. That was fun.
when was that? When did you start?
Earlier today, we were. I think. It was about
Earlier today.
It was about 2:00 my time. I think when we started.
Okay. I saw the premiere on the audio that you did. That was really cool. I think there was December 6th, correct?
Yeah, today was December 6th. And basically what I was doing was going in and isolating all the clips of Steve because they were coming through so low in the original recording from Evercom. right? So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
on Jody's end. So Steve's voice wasn't. So I just went in there and isolated him and turned him up upwards of 300% in some cases, just to see if we could get him a little bit more clearer and intelligible.
Yeah, because they do that common trick when you have two people in custody.
Yeah.
So they're both, Evercom has nearly all of the contracts in Texas too. And so they have electronic processing to detect if you try and put somebody on hold and do a three-way call. Sometimes it detects it, sometimes not. So you just manually put two phones together, two landlines, or I guess it sounds like they were doing speaker phone, but Jody sounds crystal clear, and then sometimes Steven's really difficult to hear. And even with the audio enhancements that you did, the other one you did yesterday or day before yesterday, that was a total improvement. You could really hear Steven very, very clearly. This one, there was still portions where it was really hard to hear Steven after you.
There. It was hard to turn it up. It was some of those parts were getting frustrating for me. I went to 400% on some of them just to try to get them the best that I could.
What were you using to edit or to improve the sound?
It's my Movavi software. Once I have a file loaded in editor, I'm able to go into like an audio control room. And I'm able to turn up volume. I'm able to cut things up into certain clips and then just select those individual clips and turn those up and leave other stuff at its normal volume. And so I'm able to do little tricks like that.
That's cool.
I'm at 1%, so I'm trying to grab a charger before I lose you all.
Oh, I see.
No, I figured it'd be great, like you were explaining in the chat there, just a little bit of the history. And since Rich is talking about the freedoms, and you were talking about the 4th of July or the Declaration, I thought it'd be pretty cool. Have your input, especially for those that aren't from the U.S. that are in chat.
Yeah. So 4th of July.
Check Discord if you want to join us. Sorry, go ahead.
So 4th of July, the common misconception, it's one of those things in history that just like Paul Revere's ride, and there's actually some misconception about that because the way it was written about wasn't totally accurate when, like in the 1900s, when they were writing about Paul Revere's ride, and so things get jumbled up. But the colonies, the 13 colonies, were going through a real tumultuous time with the mother country over taxation. And first, there's the Whiskey Rebellion. Actually, that's from a different era, but it started imposing all these taxes. And one of the ones that really got everybody in the colonies pissed off was the molasses and sugar tax, because most of the alcohol in the colonies at that time was made from sugar. It's rum or molasses. So that was coming up from the British colonies in the Caribbean. And so it was so bad and such a revolt that they withdrew that. Parliament and the king withdrew that back in England. And then they followed that up with a hefty tea tax. And we all know about the Boston Tea Party.
Right.
And then the final straw was what was called the Stamp Act. And so every document that you filed, every official document that you needed to conduct business, you had to purchase a stamp and affix a stamp to the document. And so that was pretty much the end of it. A lot of people are in the impression that, the majority of the people living in the colonies wanted independence. They really didn't. They wanted to stay with England because England had the biggest, most powerful navy in the history of the world at that time. The colonies were protected, but they were just getting really upset about taxation without representation. And the pleas to England went unheard and ignored, and they extended what's known as the olive branch to England, saying, and they did this in secret, saying, please, if you'll just concede to this or that, we could probably kill this whole thing. And so please consider this. And that was rebuffed. And
Reed, it's a son of a bitch, ain't it?
yeah. So I was saying earlier, there's 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence when it was ultimately signed. And about a fourth of those were either born in Scotland or of Scots descent. And you know how us Scottish are, we only take so much and then, that's it. And so the colonies got together and said, we're going to declare independence. And there were 5 authors of the Declaration of Independence, and everyone pretty much knows about Thomas Jefferson, wrote the first draft, and then the committee looked at it. But Thomas Jefferson and others in Virginia, when they wrote their state documents, they were enthralled with the people of the Scottish Enlightenment. And Dr. John Witherspoon, who moved to the U.S., was educated at the University of Edinburgh. And
actually, so Sharon tells me it's Edinburgh.
Edinburgh. And there's a lot of connection. John Locke, who was part of the Scottish Enlightenment, he was the one that first wrote about the natural rights of man, which included life, liberty, and then he said the ability to own property. Everybody, those were natural rights that everybody should have. And then that got transliterated by Jefferson into life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Benjamin Franklin was a little squeamish about using the word God, and so it got changed to we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. So we all kind of know the preamble, but then it goes on for 4 pages in a textbook, or the rest of that long document about all of these grievances they had with King George, and went on and on and on and on. And the committee got it, and they made about 86 amendments, if memory serves, and it cut the length by about a fourth. And Thomas Jefferson was pretty upset about the amendments. He thought that his first draft was fine as is, but anywho, it got tweaked and so on and so forth, and it was pretty much in final form. And so they officially announced on July 2nd, they officially announced that the colonies were declaring independence. They were going to be known as the United States. And of course, news traveled slow back then, about 6 weeks,
Right.
which that manifested itself in the war. They couldn't adjust. It would take 6 weeks for the king and his military advisors to make adjustments during the course of the war. But anywho, after the final draft was submitted on July 4th, and why we celebrated on July 4th is the Congress that we had established amongst the 13 colonies.
Continental Congress?
Yes, officially ratified the Declaration of Independence. And then it was signed with the big John Hancock and all of the others by the 56 others, 57 others. That was signed on August 2nd. And then a copy with just 2 signatures, John Hancock and a guy named Thomas, were the only 2 signatories, and it got sent to King George because the other 55, to sign that document was an automatic act of treason, treason punishable by death. And so it was.
Was that Thomas Hart?
Pardon?
Was that Thomas Hart that you were thinking of? Because I do have a relative.
Last name Thomas. Last name Thomas. You have a relative, a Hart, that signed the Declaration?
Yep. I believe it was Thomas Hart. My dad and I talked about it years ago. I'd have to double check which I can't remember if it was Thomas or John. I know that's way off, but
this one, his last name was Thomas, and they were the only 2 that signed the one that went to England. And then, there had already been skirmishes by this time, and that launched us full bore into the Revolutionary War, and which in England is called anybody know? They call it, they don't call it the Revolutionary War in England. Anywho,
right. Oh yeah.
We'll see if somebody can get it. I can't see the chat going on right now, but
let's see if Paul comes up with it. Paul just said treason is still punishable by death in the UK.
It is in the US too, but you have to have that's the one crime where you have to have at least 2 witnesses. So there's a lot of Scottish
Ziggy says the
connection
War of the States.
with. Pardon?
Ziggy guesses the War of the States. Is that what they called
no,
it?
the war between the states was the Civil War.
Well, okay. That was her guess. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. So good guess, but one of our major wars, and England and France were actually involved indirectly in the Civil War. So we ultimately won that war, of course, what we refer to as the Revolutionary War. And then
Duncan Thompson guesses War of Independence, which is, I think, what we would call it. I don't know. The battle for the colonies is what would occur to me.
Maybe it was King George's folly. I don't know. Anyhow, I believe the British refer to the Revolutionary War as the man, it just was at the tip of my tongue and something else popped in. We'll figure it out. Anyway, so we won the war. George Washington emerged victorious, and then we settled into this confederacy of states, and it really wasn't working out too well because we had this huge debt, and the different states had different levels of debt that they incurred. And there was a lot of dissension and bickering, that this state wasn't going to contribute to a common fund if, the other state racked up a big bill, they were going to have to pay it on their own. Even though it was a united cause that led to victory. So all these problems, there were huge problems with interstate commerce, all kinds of barriers. Every state had its own currency. Every state had its own central bank. And so interstate, there was really no common army. There was no common defense. We were sitting ducks for a good period of time. And so it was in the summer of 1787 that we had the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. And it wasn't even supposed to be that. It was supposed to be something else. They were going to, try and make revisions to the Articles of the Confederacy, is what it was called at the time. And they pretty much got down there and said, we need a complete rewrite of this. So Rhode Island didn't even send delegates in protest. And so they produced, after the long, hot summer, what we now know as the Constitution, and the 13 states in existence at that time approved the final version of that. And June of '88, and then that was the 9th state, which took 9 of the 13 states to ratify it, approved that in March of '89. So 77 to '89, after we won the war, we were essentially a failure. And so we didn't even really know what we were going to become when we declared independence. And it was such a bold thing that these men, literally put their lives and fortunes on the line. If they hadn't, if it had gone the other way, they'd
all be dead.
Surely would have been put all to death.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or possibly sent to Ireland, exiled to Ireland. I don't know. But in any event, these, and then Thomas Jefferson, the great mind that wrote the Declaration of Independence, he had no input into the Constitution. He was in France as our delegate, trying to make more connections and be able to expand the country and so on and so forth, which he was successful, but he was out of the picture. And Benjamin Franklin, who was on the Committee of Five that wrote the Constitution, was at the Constitutional Convention, and George Washington. And so when we refer to the founders, you hear founders and framers, and this is another thing that gets mixed up all the time. The founding fathers of the country were the folks that were involved at the time of the Declaration of Independence. And then the framers are the folks that were at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. Many of those men are both founders and framers. they took a big gamble and ended up victorious. The war didn't go well the first year at all.
I know. We actually lost a lot more battles than we won. We
Yeah,
actually just won the right ones.
Yeah, Washington got his ass kicked repeatedly, and then, but fortunately, Washington was the type of man that could learn from his mistakes, and then also make bold gambles. And then back then, you only could engage in war. It was seasonal. And, it would shut down and, they spent that long winter at Valley Forge. And then, he had a spectacular campaign that next season. And, but so we get through that, and then we start to really stumble because the Constitution. But you can't have the Constitution without the Revolutionary War. And so it's obviously the birth of our nation, and, and why it's celebrated. I always thought there was a big ceremony in 1989 on the 200th year of the Constitution, and it was fairly big, but it wasn't anything near what it was with the bicentennial. But I think Sunshine asked me, what's my favorite date, and it's either pick 'em, either when the Constitution was drafted and formed in June of '88, or ratified in March of '89, but we would never have that written document unless we prevailed, got our independence, and then kind of struggled with a mixture of governments, this, confederacy of 13 states that was just loggerjam. You needed had to be unanimous to amend anything. And of course, the North versus South struggle was starting to amplify. There were great compromises made over, slavery isn't mentioned once in the Constitution. They used a variety of euphemisms for the word slavery, and people were counted, people of color were counted for purposes of determining how many congressmen you got. They would count, back then it was going to be people who were African American, they counted as 3/5. So they even had a numbering system, and then there were huge compromises over that, and that eventually, as Ziggy was pointing out, they couldn't get the Constitution on without compromise, and because they had to compromise, if anybody saw the movie Lincoln, that's a pretty historically accurate presentation of what happened. But no, the 4th of July is a big date. We can debate whether it's appropriate for the 2nd, the 4th, or August 2nd when they all signed it. But, July 4th is, as Sunshine indicated, Adams thought that July 2nd was going to be the day that would go down in history, and wrote his wife Abigail about it, and was just so excited that the document they'd been working on for well over 2 months was final and ready to go to Congress. And so July 4th it is, and you know, it's a big day in the United States, and so I try and educate people. You know, I guess like Christmas or a lot of other holidays or whatnot, the meaning behind it kind of gets lost behind the
arbitrary day gets picked.
Yeah, but you know, the traditions, fireworks and barbecues, and we had a parade right down our street this morning. It was pretty impressive for a neighborhood parade. I think there was over 100 kids in it, about 10 antique cars and fire trucks, and these kids, just, you could tell they spent hours and hours decorating their bikes in red, white, and blue. But no, it's the 4th of July is, you know, it's Independence Day, and it's to celebrate, you know, that how we broke away from what was considered our, you know, oppressor at that point, and went out on our own. And then we got in another tangle with England in 1812, the War of 1812, which Britain calls something else also. But they, you know, it's important, I think, for us to know, you know, 4th of July, there's a lot of things wrapped up in that, you know, England wasn't all that terrible a place. It was just they were burdening the colonies. They were burdening the colonies because they were at war with France. And brilliant people like Adams, who had gone to France, and ultimately Jefferson. Yeah, they knew how to exploit the one's hatred for the other. And now, you know, Britain is our greatest ally, us to them also. You know, we are extremely close. One will almost follow the other without question. Britain has jumped on all of our engagements in Iraq, Afghanistan, with just a simple phone call, and us for them. But yes, unfortunately, sometimes it takes something like that. I would like to think in this day and age, if something like that was happening, it'd work out differently. And I think that would be, because we, both the U.S. and Great Britain, since the 40s have been granting independence to all of their former protectorates and colonies. And actually, technically, Canada and Australia are protectorates of Great Britain, because they remain a naval power, and both remain tied to the monarchy. And so it's good to know the history, and I'm glad we have people here from the UK and Australia, and because they have in the past given perspective on your various shows about how things are looked, you know, their justice system, some of our constitutional rights, our jury system, and so on. We borrowed heavily from Scotland, and you know, they remain to this day. And So that's probably more than anybody wanted to know about how we got to the 4th of July.
Hey, say, you know what? If people actually want the reason why people make a beef about the day, right? Is because some people out there know the real history of it, and they think others should know, right? So, whether no matter what day we celebrate it, right? You knowing what you know, you feel like other people should know about it too, right? Basically.
Yeah, and I don't really have a big beef with the day. I do every 4th of July. I do like to point out, okay, what's the 4th of July? And most people, because the way we're taught, and one, we've gotten away from civics a lot in the U.S. Over the last 20, 30 years, which I think we should reverse that trend. Civics is where you learn about all of this, plus how it applies to everyday life, like everybody's presumed innocent, that the state, in order to convict you of a crime, has to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
And we've gotten away from that.
I didn't really have any civics classes when I was coming through school. We had some social studies classes that would kind of touch on that, but really that would be about it, just not much.
Yeah, so I'd like us to go back to what we called civics, starting in middle school and in high school. They're real big in STEM right now, and that's important too. But and I'd like to see civics in the U.S. when it was taught in my day, it was like it was more, we're the best. And if there was a comparison, it was to Russia, so
Right.
it was in the middle of the Cold War. And I'd like it to be taught that, okay, this is the system we have, and this is how we got it, fought for it, died for it. And this is what other countries have. Not that it's bad, but this is the system in Italy, and this is the system in England, and we're pretty much identical to the UK and Australia and Canada. Very, very close. The major difference is on civil cases in England. They have, well, if you're in the U.S., you're taught on attorney's fees, there's the American rule and the English rule. And the American rule is that if you lose, you don't have to pay the other side's attorney's fees. But in England, if you lose a civil case, you got to pay the other side's attorney's fees. And then you learn the pros and cons of that.
Right.
And so, but no, I just think it's important, the one little fact, okay, what happened, on 4th of July, and most people, oh, well, that's when we signed the Declaration of Independence, and just like close, that's when it was approved by Congress, and then things took a while then. Some guy had to, and this is well documented, there's all the history on it. If you're ever in Washington, D.C., I'd recommend everybody go to the National Archives, and there's 3 documents in the National Archives. One is the original Declaration of Independence. The other is one of the original copies of the Constitution. And the other is one of the original copies of the Magna Carta. And those things are a big deal. And, the Magna Carta is, from centuries before. Right to jury trial and Magna Carta and all kinds of other rights. Now, of course, it only applied to rich landholders that the king had to compromise with to do what? Go to war with France.
Right.
And so, they were able to extract that compromise out of him. But, this was a long time coming, and, it's important. And I don't think it's all that important that this happened on the 2nd or this happened on the 4th. I think that people know that that's when we declared independence and we went to war, and we know the obvious result, but
Right.
it's now I can't imagine, in the UK.
I was going to say, well, speaking of things like jury trials and that sort of stuff that you were bringing up, the Magna Carta gives us, does the Magna Carta mention anything about reasonable doubt? Is that an idea that came up then?
No.
No. So is that an American invention?
No. It's a British invention, but they don't have a written constitution in the UK, in England. It's all based on case law and then parliamentary precedent. And so the Magna Carta was a huge, huge deal, but they have an unwritten constitution in England where, it's all documented over the centuries, and great legal scholars like Koch and many, many others who summarized it in books and whatnot. But the idea of beyond a reasonable doubt, there's a lot of historical debate about that, where it was first used. The important point is that many, many states, we, in Texas, for example, our highest criminal court, which is the Court of Criminal Appeals, they finally said you don't have to define beyond a reasonable doubt to the jury. You can just use the term. And so we leave it to them to figure out. It used to have a beautiful definition that said beyond a reasonable doubt is what the kind of doubt you would want to make for decisions that are the most important of your personal affairs. So we would analogize, hey, you met the woman of your dreams, you're going to get married, and you feel pretty certain about it. But this case, this criminal case, it's even less doubt than that, because you can always get an annulment, you can always get a divorce, you can always move on. You're not locked into it forever, but this is forever. And so we had all these different closing arguments because of the jury instruction. And so now it just says in there, you can't convict unless there's beyond reasonable doubt, each and every element of the offense, but we don't define what beyond a reasonable doubt is. So, I have 3 or 4 different techniques I use in jury selection, and you hope that they stay with that. But, we talk about the erosion of the presumption of innocence, and that we also talk about the flip side of that, which is that the state needs to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, or said another way, to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt. And we don't define it for them anymore. And so we go in there and we're allowed to say, if you think he's probably guilty, that's not enough to convict. If you think, surely guilty, probably, likely, that none of those are enough. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. And what the prosecutor is able to say, it's not proof beyond all doubt, because that's impossible. So they have their staged things too. But so there's this big gap in the middle. Doesn't have to be a certainty or beyond all doubt, but it's got to be beyond a reasonable doubt. And, those are, what's the word I'm looking for? They're abstract ideas, abstract concepts that you ask people, what is probable cause? What is a reasonable suspicion? What is preponderance of the evidence? We have these technical anarchisms that we use and ask, a lay jury to sort through that. And then one of the guests on your show, said it's who puts on the better show, and that's true. I think that is.
John Atwood, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and then the other thing is you got to make your client likable in some way. Even if you got to rent a grandmother, that's what one guy would tell us at seminars, a really famous attorney here in Texas. And he said, I ended up with a client, his grandmother wouldn't even show up to trial. So we rented a grandmother, it's just so bad. And I suspect that gentleman who had that, was it DeAndre? Is that how you say his first name, DeAndre?
DeAndre, right.
I suspect, the prosecution in that case painted him as not a likable fellow like they did with Stephen. And,
right.
They go to every extreme to paint the defendant as a unlikable fellow, and that's allowed. But what's it have to do whether on this particular occasion this person committed this particular act? And and now in jury selection, we just come out and ask them, what happens if you don't presume he's innocent? What happens if you don't hold the state to its burden of beyond a reasonable doubt? And then we have fairly intelligent juries here in Austin. We're one of the highest per capita educated counties in the U.S. So that's number of years of education. Normal panels are 60. I'd say 40 to 50 of a panel have a college degree. 10 high school diploma and some college, and then of that 50 that have a college degree, probably another 20 or 30 have a postgraduate degree, because we're in a high-tech center, have a major university, and so we tend to have fairly well-educated juries, but and so we get good responses. And one or two will usually get they'll say, well, you convict an innocent man, and we go ahead and we just bring out, we get the latest number of exonerations in the U.S., the number of exonerations in Texas, the number of exonerations of men and women in Texas who were on death row, and especially if it's a case based on identification testimony. And so you do your absolute best, but Someone brought up, a lot of these cases that are just horrendous cases. I think juries, you can't rely on the presumption of innocence and the burden of proof, because juries now, if they see a horrendous crime, they're going to lean towards, well,
human emotion gets too much involved no matter what. Yeah.
Well, it's like, I don't want to take a chance, and I think there is some doubt, but I don't want to take a chance. And, but besides, he could get it fixed on appeal, which is another thing jurors just don't understand whatsoever, is that because the appeals that are won that are shocking to people, those are the ones that get highlighted. The appeals because of prosecutorial misconduct that are won and so on and so forth, those don't get near the exposure that other cases do. But and I think that's why it is. But juries saying, oh well, he can get it fixed on appeal. Well, most states, including Wisconsin, Texas, totally revamped the grounds it takes to reverse a case on an appeal. And it's very, very, very difficult. So in other words, if a judge misrules on a piece of evidence and doesn't allow it in or allows it in, that's not going to be enough for reversible error. It's got to be a major error for them to reverse the case based on a judge's ruling at the time of trial. And then they create all these technical trappings that if you don't pursue an objection all the way, you can make the objection, but if you don't pursue it through this very exact and precise procedure all the way, you waive the objection. And it's just one thing after that. They just all these technical trappings, and we've seen a little bit of that in Stephen's case already, that, well, doing this or doing that, he was procedurally barred, and didn't do this or didn't do that, he's procedurally barred. And they'll fall back on a procedural error that the defense attorney or the defendant without an attorney commits without batting an eye, even when they know. It's that case that Tracy brought out. It's Denny. It's a different Denny than the Denny defendant, third-party defendant case, but 3 African Americans go to Madison, Wisconsin to sell magazines or perfume or whatever. They're selling it, and then they end up partying at a dorm at the University of Wisconsin, and all 3 of them are charged with sexual assault. And very weak case. One hired an attorney and got the case dismissed. The other had a public defender and was able to get, after the first case got dismissed and he was convicted, he was able to get his attorney to get his case reversed. And then the third one, who had no attorney, he filed his writ a week after. It was a week late. And the court knew that it was a bad case, that there was reasonable doubt all over the place. And they just said, sorry, you're a week late. We're not going to look at it. And then fortunately, the trial court judge had the power and did say, okay, well, I'm going to commute your sentence. He had another 11 years left on his sentence, but he's still got that sex offender offense, and he's still got to register as a sex offender. And so I'm hoping this new parole or pardon commission, whatever they call it in Wisconsin. I hope that's an avenue that he can now pursue and not have to do all of these things to see his, like, go to one of his daughter's plays in middle school or that sort of thing. Got to jump through all these embarrassing, terrible hoops. So you got three defendants. Two have been cleared now, acquitted, but you got this third because he filed something on his own a week late. He's still going, having to go to, he's a convicted felon and he's still having to go to sex offender registration, which, it's a pretty onerous set of rules that they have and whatnot. But so how are you celebrating 4th of July out there in beautiful Los Angeles?
Lots of fireworks. Probably going to be going off here pretty soon. Having some, drinking a little bit of beer right now. So
you're an American.
I had barbecue ribs for dinner. Yeah.
Nice.
So yeah, just hanging out and relaxing, really. Cheers.
Where did Jamie go?
He had some people show up. He had to duck out for a minute.
A couple of my really close friends, doctor and his wife, we were talking with them and said, "What are you doing for the 4th?" And they said, "Yeah, we're going to the Black Hills of South Dakota to Mount Rushmore. We're going to be at Mount Rushmore for the 4th of July." And Mount Rushmore is hard to get to. I mean, it's a real pain in the ass to get to. And I thought, how cool is that? A big fireworks show with Mount Rushmore in the background. And I just thought that was really pretty cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's what do you mean by, like, it's hard to get to? Like, what, it has like a windy road or something? Or
well, there's no close airport. Everything's like 2, 3, 4 hour drive.
wow. Okay.
It's and it's kind of like certain parts of Wisconsin. The parts, a good friend of mine, they have a summer home in Wisconsin, and it's really closest to Rhinelander Airport, but it's really hard to get into Rhinelander. And so most of the time, especially after 9/11, it was just easier to fly to Chicago and drive 3, 4 hours to the place rather than getting close. It's just really, really hard to get to. But Jamie could tell you more, but it's they were flying to someplace 3, 4 hours away. They were going to rent a Corvette, is what they said. And I don't know how bad the humidity is, but it'd be a beautiful flat drive. And then there's some cool stuff around there that you go and check out when you're up there. But it's not easy to get to the Black Hills.
Right. So I was bringing up reasonable doubt in terms of, well, like things like Fallon telling a jury that innocent people don't confess. Something that's pretty clearly not true. And things like that, like being able to use the prison call of Brendan to Barb when that was all a direct result of Len Kaczynski and O'Kelly and their, well, I don't know, for me, I don't know. It's like, I put it this way. It's like the on-bank minority said that Brendan would have been better off pro se than he would have been with Len Kaczynski and O'Kelly.
Right. And remember, that was two issues that the magistrate judge was looking at. One was, was the confession coerced? And then he ruled it was coerced. And then the other thing they were looking at was the admission of that phone call. Was that fruit of the poisonous tree, and should that have been excluded? And then the magistrate judge said, no, my hands are tied on that because of what? EDPA.
Yeah.
And that because of the deference requirement, they had to give deference to the state court on that. And then what happened on appeal up to the Seventh Circuit, so of course they brushed completely over the phone call and just got to the coercion and focused on, well, his will wasn't broken to me. It's just absolutely heartbreaking. But no, that phone call was clearly, there's no way that phone call isn't linked to that coercive confession. But
yeah,
if you rule it's not coercive, then the phone call's in as well. But no, it was horrible in one aspect, but then people that watch the series and listen to that phone call and, was it inconsistent? What does inconsistent mean?
Inconsistent mean, right.
I am his mom, I don't know.
Right.
And maybe one thing doesn't match the other. And, and so it just pops on all these light bulbs for people. Oh my gosh, he was a sitting duck. He's not sophisticated. He's socially challenged. He's learning challenged. And then not only that, but his mom is not the most educated person in the world. And, they're, so, me, a lot of people, I've said this over and over, that, if we know that there are vulnerable people in the family or extended family that they're going to go after, we hook them up with lawyers immediately. And so no one would be able to come and grab Brendan. No one would be able to come and grab Barbara and isolate them, and because it's a common tactic. And so, so that wouldn't have happened to, probably any of us. I hope it would, for certain, wouldn't happen now. That you have people living for sure in the same house, or, they're a close family, and, they got not uncommon in Austin here at all. Have several families within a 1 or 2 block walk, and you cousins go to the same school, and you would go and head all of that off. But apparently, they had never gone after Stephen or his brothers in that way, and so they just couldn't be ready for it. And it's tragic, but it'd drive you nuts to play the woulda, shoulda, coulda game.
Right.
as lawyers, we're just faced with, okay, this is what we got. Let's try and exclude this call. But if I'm not mistaken, you know, it's just funny how different people perceive that call. But it's like, well, how did you know these things? And they said, well, I guessed, like on a test. I think that's the same call. And it's just like, oh my gosh. And then Barbara responds and she goes, well, now we're going to have to, and you could see where she's going with the sentence, but she stops. Now we're going to have to convince the jurors that you were just saying it to, but she never finishes the sentence and she just goes, and I'm paraphrasing, Brendan, what have you done? What have you done?
Yeah.
And I think that was the first point that Barbara realized what they had done to her son.
Yeah.
And, now the calls, I remember listening to most of these calls. I don't know if there's new ones that had never been available before. I remember hearing a lot of gist, but so far I think you've confirmed, that what others have written about and whatnot, that there was confirmation about a date of a fire that really wasn't as clear before. Is that right? On the October 31st?
Yeah.
Or
Well,
is there anything earth-shattering to you in what you've heard so far?
Earth-shattering. I guess I'm going to say no to that question in terms of earth-shattering. I'm going to say that I find particularly the calls from October 31st to be very interesting. And the reason why I find them interesting is because I do not detect a single hint of Stephen having something really, really crazy that's requiring massive amounts of his attention going on outside of that phone call to Jody. I just don't see it. I don't hear it. I just don't see it. And that's what I find interesting. Is there smoking gun something said that's going to turn this all around? Probably not. But I find it interesting and thought others might find it interesting as well.
Oh no, I've been interested in every call because it's been a long time since, many of them I didn't bother listening to because they weren't around significant dates. Obviously the October 30, 31, December 5, 6, those were big ones because of what was going on in the case and search and arrest and whatnot, location of the vehicle and whatnot. But I remember when they were originally described to you during a live, someone said, hey, did you see that, they're posting all the recordings? And I know that there was initially some discussion. People had read those early on. I think, so the sense, I don't want to put words in your mouth. The sense I get is that there's nothing pivotal in terms of the court case.
Nothing. No, not really.
Okay.
Just interesting little things to note, really.
Yeah. Because a lot of the comments I read, which is fine, is more about maybe Jody's personality or Jody's motives, or and how maybe that came out and whatnot. And I was just assuming, based on what I heard, because those were what the comments are centered around, that it wasn't, oh my gosh, he does say, the fire and this and that, or that the cleaning. Now, you and I were talking in a phone call before you had a chance to listen to any of these, that the phone call where Brendan, you can hear him in the background. Were you able to hear for your
background? But you hear Steve talking to him, and Jody asks, "Who are you talking to?" And he says, "Brendan. He's here helping me clean up the garage."
Okay, all right.
And it's on the 30th.
But on the 30th.
Yes.
Okay. And then we know and there was nothing in the tapes. We heard in today's tape, they mentioned the bonfire and have bonfires all the time. Scott's going to testify. He's going to testify for or against you. And then Stephen finally figures out, oh, it's a preliminary hearing. So, and it's not necessarily for or against. Sometimes it's just to establish a timeline.
Right.
And so I believe he described the size of the fire a little differently in that testimony.
Scott's testimony of the fire changes. From his original statements to what he says at trial is night and day.
So, but you cannot make out what Brendan says on the audio.
Saying something to him.
Yeah, I couldn't make it out either. And then people were reporting, oh, this was said and that was said. And then my recollection was, can't really make it out. But through enhancement techniques like you did, you can improve things greatly. So I didn't know if something got, major established there.
I can go back to the beginning of that call and see what I can turn up,
Well, I was just curious because you and I talked about it on the phone before you had a chance to do what you'd been doing. But you've been covering. I've seen all of them, and I've been in the chats with them on the Netflix series. That disappointed there was only 3 segments in it.
I haven't done the 4th one yet.
Did they release the 4th one?
There's a 4th one, and it's pretty interesting as well. It has to do with DNA, and it's really interesting dynamics on that 4th one. It's pretty interesting.
Oh yeah. Touch DNA.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's DeAndre, right? Well, so we have
DeAndre's 3. The 4th one has to do with a African American gentleman in New York. He was with somebody, got put out of the car because he got in an argument with the driver, and it was right in the middle of this area of New York where it's a very acidic Jew run area, and they have this little network there. It's like their little crime diversion network, and they started following this guy, and even though he hadn't done anything, and they started following him, and then when he turned around and noticed he had 3 intimidating looking Hasidic Jews following him, he started to run. And once he started to run, it started an entire thing where they started beating him. They picked up, they took off one of his shoes and threw it up on a roof, and they ended up getting that. And then when that came back, that had this one guy's DNA on it. This one guy who wasn't there, had nothing to do with it. And basically the NYPD was covering up for the rich kid who was actually involved, was actually there and stuff. It was really crazy. Interesting, very interesting episode.
So, and in many of those cases, or all of them, one is just up the road from me, the first episode.
Right.
He was just granted a new trial, but the other thing he was asking for is a declaration of actual innocence. And then that would entitle him to automatic compensation and other things, but they didn't go that far. They gave him a new trial, and then So now they're going to probably be filing a motion that he be released on bond, and then they're going to hopefully they'll grant that, and the man can at least be out on bond. And then they covered part of it. We created this Forensic Science Commission, and a good friend of mine is she's the executive director of that. She's an attorney, and they showed her actually in that first episode where she does the part that, well, on this evidence, the height measurement, that got declared bogus. But when it came to the microscopic blood spatter, and as you know, Tom Bevel was in there. But
Gene Clark's case.
Yeah, for the defense, saying you can't determine anything with just one
drop, right?
One microscopic spatter. That alone, it won't get us there. And then the commission said, well, we disagree. And
what the hell?
It's mostly scientists. It's 5 scientists, a prosecuting attorney.
You can't deny that the jury convicted because they believed all those other spots were essentially blood and that it was a spatter pattern. That's what convinced them, right? You know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
It's like, ugh.
And then, the sniffer dog, the same, guy that was in the other Netflix documentary about the missing baby and the resort, and the 2 doctors, and it's it doesn't sound like there was a breakdown in the jobs that the defense attorneys did, that they brought all of these things up. Like many of the things, and it's said in, about Stephen's case that, they brought up all of this stuff with the jury, and yet, and so there is a sense of frustration, and it gets said over and over and over on your channel, how could the jury be so stupid? Or, how could the jury be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt? And that's how that they hear the judge bless a certain type of evidence. I'm going to allow testimony that the dog barked. I'm going to allow the testimony of the one spot of blood spatter. I'm going to allow the statistical secret software that somehow says this mixture of blood has this person's DNA in the mixture.
Right.
And so if they're hanging on the balance, it's that Houston case, and seeing the photos of how trashed that house was, and the recording days prior, is how the defense attorney described it, days prior, it had that death threat, and
yeah.
I just don't see how they could have convicted her. The fact that the grand jury no builder,
Right.
Was discussed, that isn't any big deal because they didn't have the.
But it just shows that they didn't feel they had enough then.
Right. And
new evidence isn't much. It isn't, well, to my mind, it's nothing. It's worse than nothing. It shows the prosecution reaching again.
Yeah. And that's the thing about Bevel. There's a real famous case in Austin, the yogurt shop murders, and the state hired him, and he came down and started going through stuff, and he said, no, I think you got the wrong 3 guys. And so they sent him back to Oklahoma, but the defense team found out about it and started talking to Bevel, and then they hired Bevel. And but you know, he calls it like he sees it, and you know, he just goes with what he's going to go with and give his best opinion. You know, and sometimes people like, is it Darley, or on the
TA?
yeah, on the other end of that, but you know, but you know how people, so juries just feel a lot of pressure, especially, you know, if there's a child victim, horrendous crime, they give the benefit of the doubt should go to the defendant always, because of the presumption of innocence, one, and the burden of proof. And we tell them that in picking a jury, and we say, you know, we ask them about it, but you know, sometimes that helps you get rid of a juror you don't want on there, but sometimes, you know, they just aren't 100% upfront with you, or they aren't able. It's a whole different ball game. We don't get to question them after they've heard all of the evidence.
Right.
Do you still believe in the presumption of innocence? And you never ask it that way, because everybody says, "Oh yeah, I believe in it," but you ask them, you know, how likely is it that the defendant is guilty? And merely because he's sitting in the chair. And you will get a few people who are honest, and they're honest, and they say, you know, I'm sorry to say this and to admit it, but I feel like the fact that he's been arrested and he's in the chair, you know, I have faith and confidence in our police, so I think it's likely he's guilty.
Well,
and
I
then
hope
you
never
tell
find
him right
yourself
away.
sitting there yourself.
Yeah. Well, and then you tell him, no, that's fine. Thank you for your honest opinion. I said, there are certain cases where if I was on the jury, there are certain types of cases I cannot be a fair juror on. I just, no, because of past experience. And so there are certain types of cases that jurors can't be fair to the state on. And, you know, all we're trying to do, and so you compliment them for being honest and what a good job they did for being honest. And then you immediately start asking other jurors in the panel, does anyone else here feel like Mrs. Smith does? You know, raise your hand. And sometimes you get a few more, but no, you can't ask them the direct question, you believe in the presumption of innocence. You have to peel it down much more definitive, but you know, and so that is the bottom line on, you know, how could they have convicted this person on that kind of evidence? And the answer is, if you have a horrendous crime, child victim, they tend to give the benefit of the doubt to the state. And then, you know, in Stephen's case, they had his DNA in the car. And so they pretty much quit listening after that, I'm sure, because the stuff about the license plate and on and on and on, all of your listeners are familiar with all of that stuff. Right. You know, they it's like, well, how could they do it? And the reason why they did it is, you know, they had his DNA in the car. And so they just gave the benefit of the doubt to the state that it wasn't planted. And then in this, what's the name of the series we were talking about with 4 episodes?
Exhibit A.
Exhibit A. And in Exhibit A, the theme is, in each case, there was one piece of scientific evidence that tipped it. It seems to me, especially in that first case on the height, that and you just compare the two guys, and you see that creative editing and that creative genius of the person who put that series together. I mean, that expert, he's in, just some shithole of a place for his deal, and then he's sticking that dummy into the front seat of his car in a part of it. I'm thinking, is he doing that for a forensic case, or is he doing it for Diamond Lane? And
right, exactly, carpool, right.
And then you look at the guy that the Forensic Science Commission of Texas hired. He's a PhD in that field, and he's just like, this isn't even close. The guy tried to make it out, well, it's just a difference of opinion between two experts. No, it's a guy who's really an expert, and bring stuff into a program and calling yourself an expert. But the point being that jurors like, okay, well, this guy isn't the greatest guy in the world, and there is an expert who came in, and there is one witness who said, yeah, it looks like him, even though that was just total shady dealing on, there were 6 pictures in that deal, and then he covers up the left 2 and the right 2.
Right, yeah.
And said, well, how about out of these 2 guys? And then it's like, what's next? Well, how about, and all his voice, and, and it's, I really, really liked, he gave great testimony and great explanation about video is a fiction anyway. It appears to be continuous stream. And this because of the type of work you do and the systems you install, and, the different quality of video that people can have for their different systems. But, and they showed the Patty Hearst video back, 8 frame per second bank machines, and versus 60 frame per second system I now have. But
right.
There's a lot of difference, and that your mind fills in. Even with a 30 frame per second system, you're basically watching still pictures.
Yeah.
And so the average officer can fire a gun. It's about 0.25 seconds per shot. And so, as he showed in that video, that's a pretty famous video we use in cases about shots fired and whatnot. The refresh rate on the frames per second, if it's not fast enough, it looks like the officer fired, or the suspect fired twice, when in fact he fired 8 times, just because the video's not catching it. And I thought that was just absolutely excellent. But I went back and read the Forensic Science Commission report that was done after that was all done, and that guy was a joke. I mean, just an absolute joke.
Mm-hmm.
And just really terrible. Yeah, he said he was at least 6'1". Is what
he's huge. Well,
and
I mean,
then
George is, but
and then, and
what kills me about that one, Travis, is that all you have to do is like 7-Eleven had like little markers on the door, like that you could like look at, right? And it's like, and then you have the one girl who the cashier or whatever said, yeah, it was like he was eye to eye with me. He wasn't like super.
But he came up with this bogus thing about
George is like,
but he's leaning over, so it's deceptive as to how he appears 5'7", but he's really at least 6'1". And then the real expert comes in and goes, the defendant is 5'7" plus or minus a half an inch or thereabouts. And so we're talking.
Or the perp, you mean, right?
Yeah, the real guy, the real guy who robbed it. And then, like I told you in the deal, the DA up there, I know him. He's already announced, oh, we're gonna retry him. We're gonna retry him, and which is that's disappointing. The decision came out. It's going on 2 weeks ago now. And obviously the decision came out after the documentary was done. The documentary came out, but those takes a lot of work to get them finished. And, that thing was probably finished several months ago. But the decision coincidentally came out when that thing got released. And about 3 or 4 days before he got the conviction reversed and gets a new trial, and the DA issued this statement, and you would think that the prudent thing, we know the prudent thing to do is for the prosecutor is to say, we are going to look at the court's decision together with the findings of the Forensic Science Commission, reevaluate it, and then come to a decision. But to announce within a day or two of the decision, we're going to retry it.
Yeah.
Pardon?
Immediate CMA? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I'm talking about. I think maybe that DA's office needs a CIU. I think all do, but definitely that one needs one, Conviction Integrity Unit, because if there was one there, they would have informed him not to say that. Most likely.
Yeah. Yeah, we have one for the Travis County District Attorney's, Travis County DA's office. We have a
I just can't believe him.
An integrity crime unit, and a good friend of mine.
That Netflix made a show about it? Did he make that statement knowing all that there's going to be a lot of people that are paying attention to it?
Well, he's up in a county called Bell County, which covers the area where Colleen is, and the Army base there is Fort Hood. That's the largest American Army base, and it's the largest military base in the world. Right. And it's a sad thing to have to say, but it is a really crummy town. And why that is that these people that serve our country in Iraq and Afghanistan or wherever, that's where the big tank base is. That's where the 3rd Army and the armored divisions are, and they go wherever we're really at war. And so as typical with the Army, you return where you start, and they discharge you, and then a lot of those folks, they can't get jobs, or they have
Bye, Sharon. Sorry. Good night, Sharon. Good.
good night. They have mental health issues. You know, we had all these veterans that were trying to hurt themselves or actually successfully hurting themselves. And it's you just have this mass of people that, so there's lots of drugs and lots of gangs, and it's surprising a town with the largest military installation in the world, and it's just it's an economically depressed area and has all of the things associated with any economically depressed area, whether it's in the middle of the LA basin or Houston or Dallas or Boston or New York City or wherever. But it's just not a good place. I know a lot of police officers up there, and there are shootings every night. It's a very violent place, but that's Bell County. But it's just, I doubt that they have an integrity crime unit. I'm real familiar with the integrity crime unit in Travis County because a close friend of mine, an attorney, heads that up. His name's Dexter Guilford, and really good lawyer and really good guy. And he had one of the original yogurt shop defendant cases, and his client was convicted. There was a team of 3 attorneys, and then later DNA got him exonerated, or not exonerated, got his case reversed for a new trial. And then the district attorney just said, we don't have enough evidence. We're not going to retry it at this point. And so they could, go after any of these people. But point being, they got, a very skilled former defense attorney who happens to be African American, but that doesn't really make any difference here nor there. He's a great lawyer, period.
Yep.
Who is familiar, had a case, go to trial, awesome trial defense team. Defendant gets convicted again because you have 3 girls murdered in a yogurt shop case.
Right.
They started a fire, burned these bodies beyond recognition, and destroyed the crime scene.
Right.
And you had, guess what? A juvenile confession got in Dexter's client. And so you have someone with that experience, and then had a client had the case reversed by DNA. And so he knows that whole process. That's who they put in charge of their integrity crime unit.
Right.
So that's a good thing. And Dallas was one of the first cities to even have one. They've had one going on 10, 15 years. And so we finally got one with the last DA election 3 years ago. And so it's been working out pretty good so far.
Awesome.
Good to have.
All right. Well, getting ready to wrap up, but I wanted to show, I know how much you're a fan of Mr. Barron's.
Yeah.
That's the Charlie Barron shirt.
Yeah, it's so cool you have that. Keep her moving. Keep her moving.
See the little colonial dudes are replaced with a guy and a chick. He decided to represent the chicks on the flag, right? Because it's supposed to be a flag, right? And then instead of all the other stuff, you put in a cooler and a barbecue. It's a tailgate party. Got the little hot dog right here. You know,
That's a brat. Excuse me. That's a brat. It's not a hot dog. The brat. There you go.
There you go. So
Yeah.
anyway, so
Yeah.
and then he's wearing the cheese head, dude, right there. That's the best bit.
Time for the Craigslist kicker.
Yeah, the Craigslist
God,
kicker.
He is so funny.
Dude,
so funny.
Do you like the ones where he does like the Craigslist? He'll find like a misconnections, and it's like, I saw you at the Quick Trip, and I thought you were very fine, and like he does these like lame love songs that he makes.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Hilarious, dude. He cracks me up. No, but the best one, dude, the best one for him, I swear, to this day is my favorite. The Wisconsin Fashion Week, 40 degrees and above collection. Oh,
that was awesome.
Dude, that
was
one
awesome.
cracks me up so much.
Yeah, it was.
It's like,
you may have missed the one.
You don't think it's warming up? Well, tell that to these snow jorts. And he has like the picture of a guy with wearing shorts that were snow pants that were cut off. He's like, go ahead, I'll wait.
You may have missed the one because it came out either the day before rally or when you all were up at the rally,
right.
And then Allie and them posted that video, the cow whisperer, and those cows came up.
Socks and sandals. Yes, thank you.
well, Barron's did one. He's cooking at this pancake fundraiser breakfast deal, okay. And he's cooking, and he goes, and he says, "Okay, in the news, we got somebody kicked by a cow, so we're going to turn it over to somebody about kickers onto cows." And then it's got this, it's like a state fair, so there's this female roving reporter, and there's a cow laying down, and she goes, how do you avoid the kickers? And she goes, well, Charlie, here's the kicker. And it's basically the back leg on what the knee would be down to the hoof. She goes, well, this here's your kicking area. If you stay away from that, you have nothing to worry about. Back to you, Charlie. I mean, it's just hysterical, He's just so funny. I don't know how he keeps pumping out the content, but the one he did just a few days ago is about his favorite giant cows. Okay. And he goes, okay, this is the largest talking cow, and we're here. Well, there's one in Manitowoc, and he's in Manitowoc. And have you seen the big cow there?
No.
It's a giant brown cow.
I must have missed that.
Oh, man. That would have been great. Having all of you.
But did you see Glow Man, the cow whisperers, when they were there? We got to send that over.
Yeah.
We got to send that over to Charlie. I bet you he could.
Yeah.
Funny.
Yeah. That was awesome. Now, if you're raised around cows and whatnot, you kind of know that, they're a herd animal. And so they're real curious, and the right conditions, they'll walk right up to you, Now, beef cows out on some of these Texas ranches are way more skittish, and the only way you can move them is with, a horse or a four-wheeler. But dairy cows are like little pets,
Yeah.
And
yeah, definitely. I can imagine. They don't have nothing to fear. It's just like, oh, I'm just going to get milked, and then I'm back off to the pasture. Okay.
Yeah.
So I can imagine. But right on.
Well, thanks for having me on. I didn't. I don't know if people were hoping other topics or whatnot, but hope people learned a little bit about the 4th of July and
how our freedoms came to be.
Note it for the future, but that even as great as our Constitution and system is, unless we have people who are educated about it on the juries, we're going to. It's a tripart. It's like a milking stool, which has 3 legs. So you got the jury that you hope you have a fair jury and that will really look at the case objectively and not get swayed by passion or prejudice. Then you have the judge who's supposed to be the gatekeeper on not allowing bogus evidence in. And then the third leg is the prosecution and the defense attorney. The prosecution should be fair and ethical, and the defense attorney should be of enough competence to really put the state to its burden of proof. But unless you have all three legs of that system working, you're going to run into injustice after injustice. And it's still, even with the best of all three of those, you're still going to run into injustices because it's a human-based system.
Yes.
And
we're humans. We make errors. We misjudge things. We do that.
But a lot can be, but we're pretty good at preventing things too, like with airplanes and
sometimes if we deem it serious enough.
Yeah, but it's we got to spend money on it to make sure it's working right. And
more than just spend money on it, folks. We got to spend money on it, and we got to pay attention. Just throwing money at a problem isn't always the right thing to do either. But we gotta be willing to come out of pocket and be willing to pay attention. It kind of requires both.
Yeah, a lot of legs. But thank you for having me on. I apologize to any of you that I didn't say hello to or whatnot. I'm on my phone, obviously, and I can't see the chat. But thanks for listening. It's great talking to some of you, and hope to see you all soon.
Yep, it was great. So I'm going to go ahead and take us out with a little bit of the man, Stacy Seabrook, one of my favorite songs. And I'm actually going to play two songs here, folks, because I'm going to follow up with his most recent one, so everybody can hear that. So first, we're going to hear one of my all-time favorite Stacy songs. So here we go.
Bye, everybody. Happy 4th of July.
Let's keep talking about Avery. Yeah, let's keep talking till he's set free. Oh, you just listen, I think you'll see why it matters. Really matters. Put aside the documentary, the state's version of ludicrousy. Oh, all their claims so blatantly get torn to tatters. I think that matters. I bet you heard about Hood Lad Sweat, but maybe you ain't heard this yet. 19 more times the DNA that was left anywhere else that day. I think that matters. I really do. I think it matters. An ex-boyfriend with a David Planner page, and yet they did not investigate. And who knows why, and who can say why he was signed into the crime scene that day. I think that matters. I really do. I think it matters. About the barrel that once was seized.
Sharon was hanging on your every word, by the way, Travis.
And returned to the Averys. The bones were found the next day, but not one photograph exists of where they lay. I think that matters. I really do. I think it matters. I could go on listing things off, 80 more things. I just keep on singing these songs till every freedom rings. I said it matters. It really, I know it matters. It could be you, I think it matters. It could be me, I know it matters. Work with Casey, it matters. I said it matters. It really matters.
Is that the end of the show?
This is Stacy's new one, folks. I haven't even listened to it myself yet.
I have.
I go by the name of a Denman Stace, and I write songs about the Avery case. Because for me, it's a total disgrace to see freedom and justice laid to waste, while so many see but simply turn face. We all know money was at stake, but this was more about saving face. They got it wrong in 85, he was freed by DNA. There was no way they could let it end that way. They cooked up a plan to make him pay. Yes, they convicted old Avery, but there's so many anomalies that simply fall apart under basic scrutiny. And he's shaking that cabinet, and out pops the key. Recreate that, my friend, because I wanna see. Now I'll keep singing, I got dozens more. No matter how much you beg or implore. Oh, I'll keep singing till they unlock those doors. Yeah, I'll keep singing, 'cause that's what freedom's for.
Great
Oh,
song
I'll
for the
keep
fourth.
singing,
I love it, Stacey.
because that's what freedom's for.
It's like Stacey read my mind to where my mindset was going to be today. Brilliant. Awesome. I love it, Stacey. I know you're not here right now, but you may watch it later. Freaking awesome job, buddy.
So nice to be.
Freaking love it. All right. That's about it for today, folks. Been a great 4th of July. I've had a lot of fun hanging out with you guys, having a few beers. Hope you guys are having a little fun and maybe having a little nightcap yourselves. enjoying your 4th of July. I hope you guys, Travis and Jamie, are both having a great 4th of July, and wish you well on this 4th of July. Hope you guys are having fun as well. And if you haven't already, please hit subscribe.
Yeah, sorry I had to skip out, dude.
Something.
No, just saying sorry I had to skip out. I had company show up, so.
Yep, no worries. No worries, buddy. So it's been fun. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe. Go over and hit it for Stacy, Paul, everybody else. We're creating a little community here, true crime community. Those of you who saw Paul reporting live from my sofa on my channel recently, maybe go give him a click. He's great. We're trying to create a little connection, a little community here where you guys can find true crime content, reliable, truthful, factual content on a pretty regular basis. So that's what we're trying to hopefully create by getting enough of us YouTubers together that are interested in the topic and creating a community. So make sure you go over and appreciate all these people or check them out. And if you do appreciate them, let them know. So that's about it for today. If you haven't already, hit subscribe. We'll see ya.